The following program is a presentation of Jez Sports. Another week of WWE television is in the books on the road to the Tables, Ladders and Chairs pay-per-view. So we're going to get straight into the action from this week's television and preview the matches that we're going to see at TLC. But first of all, I'd like to address the rumour that's been going around the dirt sheets. It's not the only rumour that we're going to discuss on this episode today. There was a rumour last week that Vince McMahon did not wish to announce the majority of the TLC card until the week before. Looking at the matches that have been announced or were announced before this week's television, it's hard to disprove this rumour. This rumour stated that Vince wanted to keep the actual match announcements under wraps because of the WWE network. The data suggests that new subscribers sign up to the network right before pay-per-view events, so Vince doesn't see any real need to announce matches way in advance. To me, this is a worrying prospect because while it might be true from a network subscription rate standpoint, the weekly television shows run better knowing that the feuds that we see on television are actually building to something. The Lana Lashley-Rusev car crash might have been more palatable knowing that it was going to end at TLC. That's not to say that WWE are going to or have stopped building towards pay-per-view matches altogether. It's clear that that's where the Roman Reigns, Baron Corbin nonsense was going. But sometimes, and especially with annoying rivalries like the ones I've mentioned, you just want to know that they're going to pay off soon. Nobody likes uncertainty. This past week's SmackDown kicked off with The Miz and Bray Wyatt. I've alluded on this podcast before how much I like seeing Daniel Bryan and The Miz together on television. With WWE holding off showing us what happened to Daniel Bryan under the ring last week, using The Miz as a proxy against Bray Wyatt is an excellent move. The theme of family played a big part in this segment and gave us the impression that Bray Wyatt is still a little bit bitter about Daniel Bryan's betrayal of the Wyatt family all those years ago. Bringing up The Miz's family immediately puts a stop to Miz's intervention and sends him scurrying back to protect his family. This was a very good opening segment for SmackDown. Next up, Mandy Rose took on Alexa Bliss. While the match itself was forgettable because of a few botched moments by Mandy Rose, the ripping off of Alexa Bliss's false eyelashes was an interesting part of this match. I'd be happy to see the teams of Bliss and Cross and Fire and Desire occupy each other's time for the next couple of weeks. This brings us on to a backstage segment between Drake Maverick, Dana Brooke and Elias. This recap and all other recaps of this week's SmackDown are brought to you by ProWrestling.com. Backstage, Dana Brooke is in catering with Drake Maverick. He's asking about how she is going on a dinner date with Dave Bautista. Maverick states that he feels rejected and that he felt something between them last week, asking what he doesn't have that Bautista does. This leads, as it did last week, to Elias popping up and trash-talking Maverick. Elias sings a funny song, and at the end, Maverick slaps Elias and walks away. Now, I badmouthed the return of Elias last week, but I must say that this backstage segment would have been a total train wreck without his presence. The song was entertaining, more like a John Cena rap promo than a song, but a fun way of insulting Drake Maverick and setting up an issue between the two men. As we return from the commercial, Drake Maverick is actually in the ring. He claims that his life is a joke to everyone and that everyone thinks it's funny. Maverick tells Elias that nobody makes a mockery of him, his marriage or his wife, and that he wants a fight. Elias and Dana Brooke make their way to the ring, and Elias puts his hand on Drake's head and he isn't able to reach him for a punch. Elias then bends Drake Maverick over his knee and spanks him, and then proceeds to kick him out of the ring. Literally. He shoved him out of the ring by kicking him up the rear. I'm really not keen on the whole Elias mocking and picking on Drake Maverick because he's smaller thing. If this is all Spud's role is going to be in WWE, can we not? Let's find something else to do. Next up on SmackDown, we have got a Fatal 4-Way #1 contendership elimination match. The team of Mustafa Ali and Shorty G take on the Lucha House Party, Heavy Machinery and The Revival. I'm not going to recap the full detail of this match. You can go and watch the matches yourself if you are so inclined. But the order of eliminations, I feel, is important. First of all, the Lucha House Party were eliminated by Heavy Machinery. Following that, Heavy Machinery were themselves eliminated by The Revival, leaving the final two teams in this match, The Revival and the team of Shorty G and Mustafa Ali. The remaining two teams hit the ring and everybody starts brawling with each other, eventually leading to the outside, where the Revival get the better of things. The Revival trash talk New Day, who are on commentary, and Shorty G and Mustafa Ali end up sending the Revival crashing into the champions. Back inside the ring, Shorty G plants Dawson with a backdrop. He aims to make the hot tag, but is cut off by Wilder. Shorty G, I still hate this name, ends up hitting a double German suplex to both members of the Revival and finally hits his tag. Ali hits a super kick as Gable turns into a suplex, but as Ali goes for the pin, Dawson stops it. Ali tries to roll through into the ring, but he is levelled by a huge clothesline from Dash Wilder. Ali gets back into the swing of things with a tornado DDT though, bouncing off the second rope to hit it. He looks for the 450 splash, but Dawson pulls Wilder out of the way to save him. Gable tags in, Ali tries to hit a suicide dive, but the Revival catch him and launch him into the Timekeeper's area. I actually liked that moment, that was quite a nice one. Gable hits a senton from the ring apron and ends up locking in the ankle lock. Wilder reverses, and Gable falls to the ropes, with Dawson nailing him with a forearm. From there, the Revival hit the Shatter Machine and the Revival pick up the win. It's great to have a big match to determine the #1 contenders for the SmackDown Tag Team Championships. Chad Gable just can't escape the tag team division though, huh? Off the top of my head, I make this the 4th team he has been in on the main roster. Whether this team survived beyond this match remains to be seen, but at least this makeshift team didn't come out on top of some of the best, most established tag teams on the SmackDown roster. 3 of the top most established tag teams on the roster. After stumbling through Jobbersville, North Carolina, Lacey Evans got her receipt from last week's confrontation with Sasha Banks and Bayley. After flashing us her wonderful, outraged face for the 2nd week in a row, Sasha got into the face of Lacey Evans, got knocked down, and set up a sneak attack from the SmackDown Women's Champion. This was a nice moment between the three, cementing Lacey Evans' face turn with a reminder of her military past. American audiences are always going to eat that stuff up, especially at this time of year. As SmackDown continued, I phased out a little bit as Cole and Graves started to run down the matches announced on that night for the TLC pay-per-view. But my attention snapped back so hard when they revealed that Bray Wyatt would face The Miz at the pay-per-view. 2 things here. 1. Daniel Bryan and Bray Wyatt already agreed a match for the Universal Championship, so why are we not getting that? 2. The match advertises Bray Wyatt himself, not The Fiend. I don't know how I feel about that. Maybe I'll get back to you later. The close of SmackDown saw Roman Reigns take on Dolph Ziggler in the main event. The match itself was fine, with the usual fare, Baron Corbin interfering from outside of the ring to attempt to help Dolph Ziggler get the upper hand. The conclusion of the match saw Baron Corbin jump onto the ring apron, only to eat a Superman punch from Roman Reigns. Dolph Ziggler went for the roll-up from that distraction, but it didn't work. Reigns nails him with the spear and gets the victory. After the match, Roman Reigns continues to get a beatdown from the Corbin crew. This eventually leads to Roman Reigns being handcuffed and almost literally hanged over the top of the ring post. As they continue to beat him down, Dolph Ziggler brings out some dog food and they pour the tin of dog food over Roman Reigns' head. Now, I will tip my hat ever so slightly to the end of SmackDown. The writing had Corbin vow to embarrass Roman Reigns, and you know what? They delivered. After weeks of being embarrassed to watch the tripe that Corbin and co have been delivering, covering the big dog in tripe is a pretty good way to raise the stakes and make things more personal. If you're going to give Roman Reigns this stupid big dog name, he should be doused in dog food every once in a while. I still don't care about their match at TLC, but maybe I won't fast forward through it now. Overall, a fairly average SmackDown, nothing special. It is nice that we finally got some matches announced for the pay-per-view that was happening in just over a week from that event, though. Over the weekend, WWE released a few superstars from their gigantic roster: Luke Harper, Sin Cara, and The Ascension. The release of Luke Harper was long overdue. He should have got his release when he asked for it, rather than having to waste a year of his life doing absolutely nothing. The smart money now obviously has him going to All Elite Wrestling, but I personally don't think that that is the best move for him. I think he needs some time in Japan, or maybe even a chance to shine and be one of the top guys in Impact Wrestling. Ultimately, the decision is his. We'll have to wait and see what the future holds for the man who will be formally known as Luke Harper. Sin Cara, there's not much to say about. There's no real loss. It isn't 2010 anymore. I am surprised that he lasted as long as he did on the WWE roster. The Ascension were never really given the chance on the main roster since they came up from NXT all those years ago. I hope that these guys go to All Elite Wrestling, that they're given more rope to be the brutal Ascension that were untouchable in the early days of NXT. And while we're at it, let's give them their original Let Battle Commence music that WWE don't own the rights to. NXT handed the main roster a perfect heel tag team that was systematically destroyed by the WWE system over the years. I hope that this release isn't the end of them and that we'll see them again in a dominant fashion in another wrestling promotion. Moving on to this week's Monday Night Raw then. Recaps for this show are also provided by ProWrestling.com. We kickstart the show with Jerry Lawler in the ring as he reveals that Rusev and Lana's relationship is at the point of no return. And tonight we will oversee the signing of their divorce contract. Yippee. Lana turns up with a lawyer and they hand over a letter revealing that the restraining order has been lifted for this moment. Because that's how restraining orders work, right? However, it is only the distance section of that law that has been lifted. Everything else remains. So he's not allowed to hit her? Yeah, that's kind of general law, not restraining order law. But anyway, Lana says she has to be honest. She tells Rusev that she used to love him so much. She loved Rusev even when the WWE Universe didn't. She continues, stating that Rusev became just another statistic of the fame and fortune, and the people chanting Rusev Day got to his head. Lana blames the WWE Universe for making their marriage fail, but Rusev chimes in and tells her to calm down. He shows a clip of what happened last week, and Lana responds by saying that Rusev will never find someone like her again. Rusev says that he doesn't even like her, so why would he need another one of her? Rusev wants to get to the point and sign the divorce papers. He wants to sign them first, but Lana grabs them and states that it will be her first, and states that she will be taking their dog. Being that WWE love to do this risque, not really using sexual content, but using sexual content thing at the moment, they missed a golden opportunity to have Lana suggest that Rusev should go first, because he always finished first in the bedroom anyway. Lana signs the divorce papers, but Rusev doesn't do so straight away. He says he wants something else first, which leads Lana to go on her usual same boring sex tirade, Speaking of sexual content that isn't really sexual content. Rusev says that that isn't what he wants. He wants a match with Bobby Lashley, which leads to the man coming out. Lashley says it's ridiculous, and then he reveals that when the divorce is over, he will ask Lana to marry him. Rusev says that he doesn't care and eventually signs the papers, but Lashley ends up slamming his head on the table. The fight spills outside and Lashley dominates, but when they get back into the ring, Lashley eats a matchka kick and Rusev plants him through the table. I'll give you 3 guesses what kind of match they're having at the TLC pay-per-view, and your first 2 guesses do not count. All I have to say about this whole segment is let's just have this match at TLC so that everyone involved can move on. Do not drag this crap into 2020. After being dragged out of the arena by the Authors of Pain last week, Kevin Owens went searching for them this week on Raw. After finding Mojo Rawley, who for some reason still has a job with WWE, Owens struck out. Eventually, Seth Rollins went to the ring and called out AOP. Seth again tried to convince KO that he and the AOP weren't associated, and he left. AOP appeared on the screen and chatted nonsense, but ultimately they didn't come to the ring either. Maybe later. Next on Raw, Matt Hardy took on Drew McIntyre. Before the match began, Drew McIntyre said that tonight's show had become a little depressing, but that last week Matt and Rebby had had their 3rd child, and that was a reason to celebrate. He then said that the child is cross-eyed, but at least we then knew that Matt Hardy was the father. Matt Hardy gets his licks in on Drew McIntyre before the match begins, and we go into a commercial break. When we return, the match officially begins. A fairly standard match leads to Drew McIntyre securing victory with the Claymore kick. Now, I personally don't need an unbroken, sleepy Matt Hardy lose a bunch of matches on television. The broken gimmick was the hottest thing in all of wrestling before the Hardys came back to WWE, and now they're just counting down the days to the time when Matt Hardy's contract expires and he can leave. While it's true that Matt Hardy's best days are probably behind him, I think there is a lot more that we can be getting from his broken brilliance. Not content with squashing no-name jabronis on this week's Raw, the War Viking Machine Raider Experience issued an open challenge for their Raw Tag Team Championship. The call was answered by the Street Profits. This got me excited in anticipation of a potential renewal of their incredible rivalry in NXT, but the match was over fairly quickly, with the Vikes winning clean. Very little scope for a return experience. We're just not allowed nice things. But wait! Maybe we can get one nice thing. WWE have made official the match between Aleister Black and Buddy Murphy. Now, of course Aleister Black will win the match, but the match itself should be 5-star. There's still a chance that WWE will ruin our nice thing though. The 10+ minute match that I am dreaming of could just as easily be a 10-minute black mass and done. Hopefully we get our money's worth on Sunday. Another match on Raw saw Andrade Cien Almas take on Humberto Carrillo. This was a pretty nice little match that saw Carrillo pick up the victory because of miscues between Andrade and his ring manager Zelina Vega. A few weeks ago there was a rumour on the dirt sheets that Vince McMahon was done with Hector Garza's cousin. I'm not sure that giving the kid new entrance music, putting him amongst top up-and-coming superstars, and having him defeat Andrade on Raw is exactly being done with him. Don't believe everything you read on the internet, folks. As Raw rolled on, KO continued to look for AOP, eventually being directed to their black panel van in the parking lot. I mean, if I were Owens, I'd probably have checked there first, but hey, what do I know? The Authors weren't in the van initially, so KO did what any other WWE superstar would do, apparently, and that's smash the shit out of the van. As KO broke open the back doors to reveal a hooded figure inside, the AOP jumped him and laid in a beatdown. With Owens down, the hooded figure revealed themselves, and it was indeed Seth Rollins, who curb-stomped KO for his troubles. Full heel it is then. Thank you. After the commercial, Rollins came out to the stage and cut a classic heel turn promo. Perhaps the best promo of his life. While the promo was good, the fake EMT's ability, or lack thereof, to get Kevin Owens' stretcher into the back of the ambulance was an instant classic. I burst into laughter watching them fumble over the stretcher. The next match saw Becky Lynch take on the Kabuki Warriors in a handicap match. The numbers game proved to be too much for Lynch in this match. At every moment that she had either Asuka or Kairi Sane in a compromised position, the other got involved and put pay to any offense that Lynch had. As the match drew to a close, Becky Lynch was able to lock the disarmer in on Kairi Sane, but Asuka was able to drag her out of the ring. Asuka then grabbed a chair and let her frustrations out, attacking the man to end the match. The Kabuki Warriors then set up a table outside the ring, and Kairi Sane hit a huge, insane elbow from the top rope to the outside, crashing through the table and leaving Becky Lynch laying. I don't feel that Becky Lynch necessarily needed to get involved with Charlotte's little identity crisis and mission to prove that she can beat the Kabuki Warriors solo. Lynch has nothing to prove beyond retaining her Raw Women's Championship, which she hasn't really done recently, nor does it look like she will in the near future. Eric Rowan match. Copy, paste. Another week, another pointless Rowan squash match. At least this week's Jabroni provided some entertainment by trying to get Rowan counted out. That's something, I guess. As I mentioned last week, I'm just not excited to see Rey Mysterio defend the US title against anyone, and that unfortunately includes AJ Styles. The match was fine, and I liked Gallows taking the 619 for Styles, but I didn't need Randy Orton out there. Better than AJ losing clean, I guess. The end of Raw left a lot to be desired. That ending was the most badly timed ending of Raw I've seen in the 20 years that I have been watching it. Was someone not paying attention to the clock and forgot to tell the guys in the ring to go home? Not at all the slick WWE production that we're used to. Overall, not the best episode of Monday Night Raw ever, not necessarily the worst. A few more matches announced for the TLC pay-per-view, some of them which should be quite exciting, some of them which we could probably do without. It's time now then for our Questions from the Universe segment. The call went out across all of our social media channels last week for questions from you, and we have a couple to answer on this week's podcast. First up, via Facebook Messenger, Jordan Reese asked, "What do you think of the Hall of Fame announcements so far?" Thank you for your question, Jordan. Now, the people that have been announced so far for the 2020 Hall of Fame are Dave Bautista and the New World Order as a unit. That is the starting unit of the NWO, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan, and X-Pac. Part of me thinks that WWE are just trying to capitalize on this Dana Brooke, Dave Bautista love interest thing by bringing Dave Bautista's name back into WWE and generate more discussion around that. But perhaps that is just me being a little too cynical. Dave Bautista does deserve being placed into the Hall of Fame. I just wish that WWE did something more along the lines of big professional sports companies like the NFL, who force their talent to wait 5 or so years after retirement before they are able to be inducted. It was only at last year's WrestleMania that Dave Bautista officially retired, so I think it might be slightly too soon for the animal, but I'm not entirely mad at it either. As a huge fan of the New World Order, I'm thrilled that they will be inducted into the Hall of Fame. For some of these guys, this will be their second entry into the Hall of Fame, and I'm not necessarily mad at that either. Their induction at the actual ceremony aside, I'm very excited at the prospect of seeing a full and proper NWO entrance on WWE television again, with the static and the black and white and the movie look. I don't really know how to put that into words, but I think you might know what I mean. Everything about it is quite exciting. We've got a few months to wait before it actually happens. Let's see where they go next and who else will be joining that Hall of Fame class. But overall, Jordan, to answer your question, I'm quite excited about the announcements that have been made for the Hall of Fame so far. On Twitter, Steve at SteveOnOnline asked, how far do you think AEW can go on in terms of competition with WWE? Will it be a long-term thing, or will AEW crumble and become obscure? Whoa, Steve, that's quite a big question. There's a lot to unpick with that. So I'll try and cover as much of my thoughts about it as I possibly can without going on for too long. First of all, in terms of the competition with WWE, at the moment they're going head-to-head with NXT every Wednesday night, and I think that's an excellent starting point for AEW. They could have come straight out and tried to go for one of the big guns of Raw and SmackDown, but I don't think that that would have ended terribly well for them. While on one hand you're going up against the best wrestling show that WWE put on the other hand, it is the least watched show that WWE put on. So you've got that balance between good quality programming and the viewership of that program. On the most part, AEW have been able to stay ahead of NXT in the ratings, but that has dipped massively since their debut. The main reason that AEW exists is because WWE, despite having the most stacked, deep and talented roster in the world, fail to utilise the talent that they have to the best of their abilities. There is something lacking in WWE, no matter the week, the year, the decade even. There is always something that WWE fail to do right, so it leaves that gap for somebody else to step in and try and take that portion of the market that are so disgruntled that they will no longer watch WWE, but they want to watch wrestling every week. 10 weeks into Dynamite, there have been some great moments. There have been some, frankly, head-scratching moments. Something JR said on Twitter a few weeks ago really stuck in my mind, and that is that nobody is responsible for the overarching creative in AEW. And while WWE is massively overproduced, there are creative team members micromanaging absolutely everything. I think that AEW, if anything, are too hands off. Nobody is bringing the whole program together in a coherent way. Each rivalry, each match exists on its own island. Whereas WWE, there is a flow to their programming. You know that at some point they're going to cover a certain storyline or rivalry, even if it's just a video package. But when you watch Dynamite, there are some wrestlers that you are not seeing week to week, even though they are in the biggest, most prominent storylines that are going on. It just feels like it needs one or maybe even a few people looking over everything and making sure that the story makes sense, that they are doing things to the best of their ability. I think that's what is lacking in AEW at the moment. So when you ask if AEW will be a long-term thing or if it'll crumble into obscurity, I think it comes down to, do they address the things that I have mentioned? As well as that, it comes down to, do they continue to recruit top wrestling talent? While they have a few of the best wrestlers in the world, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Cody, just to name a few, the talent roster is not as deep as WWE's. If WWE want to put on a 5-star wrestling match, they can choose to do that at the drop of a hat. They bring in any of a number of talent and tell them, here's 30 minutes, go and shock the world. And there are so many people in WWE that can do that. AEW, while they have a handful of people that can do that, they don't really have the depth of talent to be able to pull that off consistently. So those two things really will be the determining factor in whether AEW can continue to compete with WWE long term coherent story led by somebody at the top, and a depth of talent roster. Those two things alone, in my opinion, will determine the course of All Elite Wrestling and their competition with WWE as we go forward into 2020 and beyond. Tad bit rambly, Steve, but I hope that answers your question fairly well. If you have any follow-up questions, by all means, shoot them back at me on Twitter. I will try and answer them on future podcasts. That goes for anybody else. If you have any questions that you'd like me to tackle on the main roster, just leave us a message on our Facebook page, Twitter page, Instagram, any of the above, and I will get to them at a later Questions from the Universe segment. For now, though, that about wraps up this episode of the main roster. I hope that I've continued to engage you with content about Raw and SmackDown this week. I hope that you enjoy the TLC pay-per-view on Sunday, and I will be back next week with another review of what I'm sure will be 2 exciting episodes of Raw and SmackDown. Peace.